Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a very special guest. Very excited to get this man on. I had met him at the Cosmic Summit. I actually thought he might have been somebody else because I saw him talking to Mike and Dave, and we had a mutual friend in a way, and I thought that might have been him, and it wasn't. And I guess it was meant to happen because he eventually gave me his card. We talked a little bit, and I wanted to get him on the show because I think he's got some amazing stuff. But before we get to him, I will introduce the other rejects on the show. And we got Lisa back from the field. We missed you. Thank you very much for finally coming back on the show. The Occult Reject Mad Scientist. What is up?
Thank you so much for having me back. Good to be back. Hello to all the rejects. I'm really looking forward to this topic. I think you and I have kind of talked about here and there different things. Really cool to look at that. So anyway, the only thing I need to plug is the occultresearchinstitute.org and check it out.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. And Headless Giant, what is going on, sir?
How you doing? I'm the Headless Giant. You can watch our mailbag show every Thursday where we read your metaphysical / occult / paranormal emails, also mall dreams, and any other dreams that you could have. We just did a great episode with Pretty Bug talking about her astral projection / dream about her grandmother and how it became a frightening experience. I suggest everybody go check it out. It's a very enlightening episode. So you can send your emails to me at headlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we got Tim Constantine joining us tonight. What is going on, sir? Thank you very much.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Yeah, I'm Tim Constantine. My show is Sixth Sensory Podcast. You can find me on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Instagram. Hello to all the other rejects. Happy to be here. And Nick, thanks for having me on again.
Of course, man. Of course. Always love what you bring to the show. I appreciate it. And last but not least, before Julia gets here, we got Ethan Indigo. What is going on, sir?
I'm honored to be here with you guys. It's great to communicate. This is going to be a really fun subject, Brian. I'm excited to hear your presentation. I write on the esoteric and even the basic exoteric, and a couple articles on occultresearchinstitute.org, and more to come. So honored to be here. This is going to be fun.
Hell yeah. Thank you very much. And then finally, 3 minutes into the show, finally getting to Brian. Sir, please let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find your stuff. And please let everybody know about this movie or documentary, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, sure. Nick, well, look, man, let me first just start off by saying, thanks for having me on. It's such a pleasure to be here with this group tonight and, to meet some new people. I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. I'm quite honored. It was kind of funny. We were just walking in the hallways of this hotel, and I think, Nick, you were like, hey, are you Chris or something?
Yeah,
and I turn around, I'm like, he must be talking to me because I don't see anybody else out here. So
yeah,
no, man. I'm Brian. But then it turns out we both knew this guy, Ricardo. So I'm like, okay, well, there's a connection there. And
weird, guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, God, Ricardo, Mike and Dave know, everybody knows Ricardo. Yeah. While not everyone is familiar with what the Cosmic Summit is, maybe this group is, pretty much anyone who's going there, there's a high probability they're working on something. They've got a show, they've got something going on. So, it's these types of connections happen. And, I've made a few different other connections. Nick, I'm sure you made a bunch when you were there. That's what we do. We connect and we tell stories, and we see where there's some overlap between, our areas of interest. And I don't know how much overlap there is with what you guys normally focus on in Mars. There might be a little. We can get into it. Nick, I don't know if you got a chance to finish it, but it gets a little bit, like, it does get heavier, man. It gets into the paranormal. Okay.
Oh, you know what? I probably the last 25, 30 minutes I didn't catch.
Okay, well, that was probably the most relevant section for this group.
I can still watch it.
So I can brush over it for sure. Yeah. Not a problem. But
nobody else saw it for me, so it wouldn't matter for everybody else anyway.
Well, that's fine. Let me just, sort of just offer some context here. Yes, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I've got a film coming out about Mars. Now, that might not seem so sexy. Trust me, I get it. If you're like most other people, heck, I was like most other people as of a couple years ago. I thought, well, what's there to know about Mars? It's red. What else? I don't know.
Looks like Arizona.
Yeah. So, I have someone very close to me. Her name is Ginger. I think she's watching right now. Hi, Ginger.
Oh.
And, Nick, you know Ginger. You met Ginger
Yes.
at the Cosmic Summit. Credit goes to her because she gave me a book written by Graham Hancock. You guys probably know Graham Hancock. Fingerprints of the Gods. This was new to me as of a couple years ago. I had no idea what the hell this book was. I started reading it and like, what is this, fiction? What the hell is this? And then I realized it wasn't. I'm like, hey, this Graham Hancock guy, really, man, he's got something going on here. I got to figure out what else he's written. And I went through his archive of books. Lo and behold, he's written a book, which not many people know about, but he's actually written a book about Mars. And this came out in the late 90s. In that book, I learned a whole lot about what NASA has discovered about that planet since 1976, when we really started sending probes down to the surface. So, this, so long story short, this was a rabbit hole that I went down, and I ended up on Mars. I learned so much that I was compelled to do something about it because I felt like the rest of the world needs to know about this information. And I sort of had this internal debate. Do I do a documentary? I'm a filmmaker. I haven't ever done anything this long before. I've always done short films, but it just spoke to me. You guys know what that feels like when there's material that just speaks to you. You got to do something about it. You got to get in the game. You can't be a passive, spectator. You got to do something. So I did something, and I came out on the other end with a distribution deal, and the film is coming out on Amazon in August. So, and here we are today talking about this. And, before we get into the heavy details, it'd be nice to take it'd be nice just to take a quick poll here in the room to see what everybody knows about Mars. So I know where to start from, and I know where to fill in the blanks.
All right, Lisa, you want to start with you first? We'll see how your mic's going now.
Let's see now. What about
Yeah.
now?
Yep.
Does it sound better?
Yes.
Okay. Mars, for me, scientifically, elementary all the way into college, was that it was a planet that used to have life and doesn't anymore. It potentially was either that it moved away too far away from the optimal, orbit to sustain life, or something catastrophic happened, that it no longer was a reducing atmosphere to where oxygen exists. And then a majority of the red comes from the iron oxide, from the volcanic activity that it once had or does have, or what have you. And then that it had dry ice at the polar caps. That's pretty much majority of what I know for scientifically. Esoterically, everything from Adam, man of red clay, and that we may have come from Mars. We came down from, kind of language, and that we were made from red clay. So that could potentially mean that we came from Mars and then descended into Earth. So things like that.
Nice. Thank you very
God,
much.
you hit some nice broad strokes there, and I think that's pretty much on the money. That's a whole heck of a lot more than most people know.
Like when you did that in the documentary.
That's a fantastic answer. I'd love to hear from. Thank you, Lisa. I'd love to hear from everybody else.
There you go, Headless.
Well, in May 22 of 1984, the CIA conducted research with Project Stargate, where remote viewer number one, Joe McGonigal, was tasked to view what Mars was like 1 million BC. And they gave him coordinates that were in an area where he saw massive obelisks and pyramids and a group of people that were like huddled, and somehow they could see him and knew what he was doing, but they weren't too bothered by it. And they kind of told him that their planet was going to die, and that they had sent some people away to a different planet, and they were hoping that they would get back soon. So that was the viewing of Mars at 1 million BC conducted by the CIA. Who knows if any of that's true, but that's what I know about Mars.
Yeah, Joe McMoneagle has been making the rounds lately. He's one of the more popular guests on practically everyone's podcast these days.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
I mean, he's still with us. He's getting up there in age. He's still with us. But yes, there's been a lot of talk about this particular aspect of Mars. Tim and Ethan, what about you guys?
Who's going first? I guess I'll go.
Yeah,
So first of all, I just want to say I hope that this gets weird today. You mentioned that it might. Paranormal, all that good stuff, man. Let's go there. Let's get weird, man, because this is already weird for me. This has already been a synchronicity for me because I forgot about this show. It's my fault. It's my bad. I just missed the email and I saw the invite an hour before, so I decided to hop on. I'm supposed to be talking to somebody about this subject on Saturday, so I was going to look into Mars stuff tonight anyways. So this has just been kind of weird for me. It's cool. What I know about Mars, well, Cydonia comes to mind. Then you have the possible Bible connections with Edom, meaning red. There are 2 wars mentioned, one in Judges, one in the book of Isaiah, where there seems to be something celestial happening beyond just Israelites fighting Edomites. Angels were admonishing a group of people who maybe weren't people, a group of individuals from space who were supposed to come down here and help Israelites. It's in there. You just got to read with your glasses on, I guess. So I've always been curious about those possible Mars connections in the Bible. And then of course, the remote viewing CIA documents. I saw, I'll put off, I think it was the Rogan interview, the recent one where he was talking about remote viewing Mars. And as he's talking about it, I'm thinking back on the time when I actually read through those documents, and hearing him talk about it was shedding new light on that for me. I thought that he was talking about in the documents, because they've been redacted and maybe spun. I thought that he was talking about aliens up there in those, I don't know, some sort of a cryogenic sleep chamber or something. Now I realized in the interview, oh, he's talking about something that looks like us, big, like big humans.
They were much taller.
Yes,
and
like tall humans. So
it seemed like, have you ever seen the movie John Carter?
I'm familiar with that, yeah.
Well, that sort of John Carter monster that was much bigger because they had lower gravity on Mars.
Yeah.
And,
so
that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So that's I'll cap it off with that.
Yeah, and that's just curious, Tim. I'd be curious to know who you're talking to on Saturday about Mars.
Okay, a guy named Doug Elwell.
Okay, well,
he wrote a book called About Planet X, so he's new to me too, actually. So
okay, all right, thank you, Ethan.
Well, I love chipping into all these wonderful interpretations. I call it occult intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. We all bring some really interesting ideas. One thing that's interesting is the long, as long as humanity has been here, the symbological influence of Mars. Even at the turn of the century, there was a book written by a Russian author, a fiction book that was really one of the first modern science fiction books. and I think it is called rather Red Planet, and it is excuse me, Red Star, and it is in the inspiration for the Red Star symbolism in Russia, certainly, and beyond. And there, the guy goes to a utopian planet where communism has manifested. Anyway, interesting influence. And as someone with a layman's comprehension of the nuclear experiment and an interest in it, I find the idea that you mentioned the preview to your film mentions the idea of the xenon. Forgive me for forgetting the element number, but I find that a really compelling proof of some sort of phenomenon that's undeniable. So those two, just the long-term influence on humanity's thinking, and that very hard science of that being indicative of a powerful event strikes me.
Oh, interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, you guys are touching on some interesting points here. Julia, hi. Before I get into more about what I've worked on here with Mars, I was just taking a poll of the room to see what everybody else, what their starting point was with Mars.
With Mars in particular?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I when I first started my whole conspiracy theory journey, I was a big Gaia person. And I watched a lot of interviews of people saying that there was some interesting stuff going on Mars, and that and astrology and stuff. Obviously, I think that it does have a spiritual influence over people. I mean, I'm curious about all of that stuff. I'm not gonna like poo-poo anybody's beliefs or anything, but there's supposed to be like some kind of different race of people that lives there or something like that. I know a lot of people have talked about that before. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Okay, so this is good. You guys have heard a bunch of the cool stuff, and for those that have joined us who are watching this who have no idea what we're talking about, I'll do my best to try to make sense of all of this. So yeah, I think if we go back to what Lisa was saying, the broad strokes, I guess, from the mainstream scientific perspective, and thus the title of the film, what we see today as the red planet was not always as it appears today. It was a blue planet. It was a blue planet before Earth. And then something happened to it. Now, when we say blue planet, there's that excellent BBC series, Blue Planet, which you guys have probably seen. But aside from that, what does the word, the phrase blue planet mean? What do you think that means? What does that conjure up?
Water.
Water and life, going back to something Lisa said, because, how do we determine if there's life or not out there in the universe? It seems to be if there's water or not. And judging by the scarred topography of Mars, there seems to have been water there. So I think it's safe to say that there was life there, maybe still is.
Yeah, that's it. It's that simple. Blue, water, life. So, and
I
this is...
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
It seems like Mars has a stunning lack of
Hellas, your mic is messed
biomes. What's that?
Yeah, mic is messed up a little bit. Sorry, bro.
Oh, sorry. So there might be an issue when it comes to there's no differences in the soil texture. I mean, just looking at it from Earth, it doesn't seem like there's massive changes in the, I guess, geological features. It all seems sort of one shade of red.
Yeah, it kind of does. So at a glance, Mars really just appears to be quite an uninteresting place. Everything's just homogenous. I can't help but use the word boring. I mean, how many rover photographs have you guys seen? Just a bunch of rocks. Just a bunch of red rocks. Thanks. Okay, I've seen this 100 times before. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal reveals itself when you start looking at the details. Okay? And when I started looking at the details, as published by people years ahead of when I even came across this stuff. See, the thing about the documentary is that it's not really breaking any new ground. All the information that was presented was already published, either in research papers or in videos, in books. So I just took a general look at the entire landscape, and I said, there's a story here, and I have yet to see anybody piece it all together. There's so many different people working on Mars, but they're all siloed, and they don't necessarily like each other. And the thing about Mars, in general, the way I like to frame it is Mars, for me, is the redheaded stepchild of the disclosure topic. Okay, UFOs are getting a lot of attention these days, and believe me, that's really exciting. There's a lot of reporting on UFOs. There's a lot of interviews and such. But what are we lacking with UFOs?
Actual physical evidence.
Data.
Oh, there.
Evidence. Mars has virtually no reporting on it, but it's got a shit ton of data. Evidence. And let's talk about this word evidence, because a lot of people confuse this word with the word proof. When you hear me use the word evidence, I'm using it in the strictest legal sense. Okay? Evidence means suggestive of. Proof means conclusive of. Okay? So you'll find no shortage of people online saying how certain they are of something. It is proof. It is 100%, blah, 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 blah. Okay? That is not the language I choose to use, because that can get you in a lot of trouble. And with regard to communicating what has been discovered on Mars by NASA, we have to really be careful with the language that we use. And we have to ensure that we are communicating to people without getting their defenses up. Because when you start talking about all this crazy stuff like you guys are touching on, people are like, okay, this starts to sound a little wacky. These guys are nuts. Like, I'm out. So, Nick, having been somewhat exposed to some of the deeper end stuff here, Ethan, sounds like you were too. Some of the stuff in the first half of the film might seem kind of mundane, when we're talking about water and any potential evidence for even just microbial life. Okay. But that's where a lot of people are. Okay. So I structured the film as, look, if you don't know anything, that's okay. I didn't know anything either. And so I know what my journey was like. And if you start with the heavy stuff, it's just too much of a shock for people. So I like to get a sense of what people know and get people thinking, like we were just talking about. If Mars was a blue planet, then what does that really mean? Water, life, what kind of life? Well, if the planet was blue for millions or billions of years, that means it was habitable. Like look at ancient Earth. Ancient Earth was not habitable. It was a hellscape. Volcanic activity, not a habitable atmosphere. Earth wasn't like Earth, as someone put it to me recently. Earth became Earth-like much later. But Mars was Earth-like a long time ago. So, there's a gentleman in the film who, presents the question: if Mars was like Earth, and if it had water, and if those conditions gave rise to primitive, simple life, and if that simple life evolved into an intelligent life who then built tools, so there's a plausible way that intelligent life, given enough time, as we've seen here on Earth, could have developed stuff. Now, without really seeing any of the pictures or seeing any of the data, it's really hard for people to buy into this. And while I do criticize NASA for, well, they have done a tremendous job discovering a lot of stuff. They've given us insights into our solar system, our galaxy, and the universe by these fancy tools, the engineers that they got at JPL making these telescopes and landers and orbiting systems. I mean, it's just incredible work that agency has done. They have discovered a lot of things. Now, where NASA doesn't do such a good job is talking about what they've discovered. So I'm sitting around here learning all this stuff about Mars, which we're going to get into, and I'm thinking, why isn't everybody else talking about this? This is nuts. And that's the thing. Nothing made it into this film without me vetting it first. Whether it be the original NASA source images on their website, published data, everything. I didn't just take people's word for it. I can't put my personal and professional reputation on the line for life on Mars just based on hearsay. I had to go back and track all this stuff down. And that's the respect that I pay to the audience. Like, look, I'm not feeding you stuff that's just made up. This stuff, you could go look this up yourself. People say that. So, relative to UFOs, microbial life may not be that interesting. But in certain circles, it's a highly controversial issue. The thought of even just simple microbes on a planetary body other than our own, some people will think you're absolutely nuts for even considering the idea. And these people are well-established, highly credentialed PhDs working in academia or even these trusted institutions like NASA. So, that's the thing about our society, is that we do trust, for better or for worse, we do trust in our institutions. NASA has a pretty high approval rating. People love the work that NASA does. Although it's just regarding transparency in the wake, in light of this topic of disclosure, they just don't have a really good track record on. So, okay, let's talk about the ice caps. Lisa, you brought up the ice caps. Believe it or not, while there is a layer of frozen CO2 in the ice caps, they are primarily H2O. It's kind of like 90% H2O, up to like a mile or maybe even 2 miles thick. It's incredible. And these things you can see with a ground-based telescope. You don't even need anything that powerful. And so just the fact that there's water on Mars, it's in frozen form, but there's water on Mars, not just in the polar ice caps, but practically everywhere on the planet. Just a few centimeters down, you dig a little bit, and you'll come across ice. So, after meeting a few different people along this journey of making this film, I met one individual in particular. His name is Professor Richard Hoover. Now, if you haven't heard of him, that's okay. Many people haven't. Professor Richard Hoover was the lead astrobiologist at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center from 1966 to 2012. And he divulged a lot of stuff to me. But one of the interesting things that he told me was that there's certain species of microbes that live directly in ice and who have a natural antifreeze that melts the ice around them, so they create their own little tiny ocean, and they can just absorb nutrients. So right there is a mechanism for microbial life to exist just within the ice of Mars. This is a possibility. We haven't even talked about testing yet. This is just the possibility. So, and as you guys know, here's a question. Where do we know microbes exist?
In space.
Everywhere. There is
Basically
no place.
everywhere. Yeah. In the most extreme environments, including space, they have adapted to survive. You can freeze them for millions of years and then thaw them out, and they'll still live. They live in the hydrothermal vents high up in the atmosphere. They've even found microbes living directly in nuclear waste. So my question is, which scientist wants to go to bat for the idea that it is impossible for microbes to live on the surface of Mars, which does have an atmosphere? It's not that strong, not that thick like ours is, but certainly the conditions on the surface of Mars are not as harsh as the harshest conditions on Earth in which we find microbes. So this premise is just such a highly contested thing. I'm getting this stuff out of the way first, just because, for those who have no idea about Mars, this is where the start of the story is. And, well, you might ask yourself, have we tested the soil of Mars for microbes? Let's show a poll here. Raise your hand if you think that NASA has tested the soil for microbes. Okay. Well, see, this is where I fault NASA. Back in 1976, NASA tested the soil for microbes. That's nearly a half century ago. Okay, here's another question. How many of you guys have ever heard of the Viking mission? Okay. You guys know what it was all about? Maybe, somewhat.
Not really.
I mean, it was a half century ago, right? So it was before some of us were even born. Maybe everybody here. So the Viking mission was the most kick-ass space mission practically ever. Get this. Back in the 70s, when NASA was kicking ass and taking names, basically saying, we're going to go out and we're going to take over the universe. We want to launch this mission to Mars to see what the hell is down there, because we really didn't know. You got to think, all we had were just pictures from Earth, black and white pictures. So the Viking mission sent 2 probes to Mars. Each probe had an orbiter that circled the planet and a lander that went down. So 2 orbiters and 2 landers. Now, can you imagine back in 1976 getting something to land on Mars without crashing? Like, stuff will crash today. Now, JPL has gotten really damn good at engineering this stuff to making sure that doesn't happen. But India sent something recently and they to the moon and it crashed. So back in 1976, this is a feat of engineering unlike anything else that had ever been done. Now, the 2 landers that landed on Mars, all they did was land. They couldn't move around. Okay? These 2 landers were equipped with 3 different life detection experiments. Okay? There is one of them that is usually referred to because it is the most consequential. I have to get into the weeds a little bit here because it's really technical, but at the end of this, you'll understand why. This one particular life detection experiment, I'll just tell you how it works real easy. You take you take a scoop of soil, you feed it some nutrients, and you see if any gas comes out of it. And what it's testing for is essentially just microbial metabolism, respiration, or just the ingestion of food. And you know, how you eat food, you produce gas. That's it. Now, this test was developed by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Gil Levin, who designed this thing completely independent of NASA because he was working as a sanitary engineer and needed to make sure that the water he was testing didn't have pathogens in it. He got wind back in the early 70s that NASA's going to Mars, and he's like, hey, you guys looking for Mars? Are you guys looking for life on Mars? NASA administrator at a cocktail party said, yeah, in fact, we are. We're going to go and we want to send something there to look for life on Mars. And so Dr. Gil Levin, he's like, guess what? I got just the thing for you. My little gizmo tests the soil directly for microbes. And here's how it works. And he told him how it works. This test was called, it's got a funky name, the labeled release experiment. And the labeled release experiment was tested over 4,000 times on Earth and never produced a false positive nor false negative. I don't know how you guys add that up, but in my book, that's a perfect test. Yes, NASA is known for redundancy, making sure that their shit works when they send it out in outer space. I don't know what better test there would be. It was sensitive enough to test, to discover just 10 microorganisms within a cubic foot of soil or something like that. Highly sensitive. So guess what? They send it to Mars, again, on 2 landers to go down. Now, who wants to guess what the results came back?
They found microbes.
Yeah.
At both landing sites, this thing tests positive.
Wouldn't this confirm the idea that there would be fossilized microbes in the asteroids that hit up near the North Pole? I know that was a big story, but they were kind of crapping all over it. Don't these two confirm one another?
We'll get to that because that is part of the story. Get to that next. Now, why hasn't NASA, for the past 50 years now, why haven't they been telling the public that they found, we'll just say evidence for microbial activity on Mars? Well, unfortunately, on the Viking mission that they sent to Mars on these landers, they included another test. And this other test, all it was supposed to do was test the soil for organic matter. Okay? Now that test came back negative. So NASA was scratching their heads. How can you have life in the soil without organic matter in the soil? They didn't know. So they essentially called it and they said, the tests are inconclusive. We're not sure. And then later revised that to absolutely no evidence. All right. But here's the thing. Decades later, we started sending rovers. Everybody knows the Curiosity rover. The latest one was Perseverance. Well, guess what? 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, the Curiosity rover found the organic matter that they were trying to look for in 1976. Turns out that test that they sent in 1976 that did not find the organic matter wasn't sensitive enough. And what makes it even worse is that they knew it. They sent this organics test to the soil, to Antarctica, to test the soil of Antarctica. And it didn't find organic matter in the soil of Antarctica. And this was before they sent it to Mars. So they kind of knew it was a faulty test, but they sent it anyway. And they let that be the determining factor on whether or not there was life on Mars. And that shaped the entire narrative from 1976 until now. And Dr. Gil Levin, the man who designed the labeled release experiment, who arguably discovered life on Mars, was marginalized from the community, shunned by his peers. People are trying to pick fights with him at conferences, telling him really nasty things. And he died right before I made the movie without ever having his research vindicated. So this is a tragic tale. And I'm hoping to right this wrong here. Because the question is, why in the wake of finding this organic matter after they sent the Curiosity rover with a better designed test, did they not revisit those results from 1976? They just kind of let that go. So what's even more interesting is that this is not the only evidence for microbial life on Mars. Nick, how much time do we have? Because I don't want to go into everything.
It's up to you. I mean,
Okay. I don't want to bore people because this is boring stuff here. All right.
Okay.
No, this is good. This should bring up the idea that maybe there's a dormancy type activities going on with these microbes. Microbes go into dormancy on Earth, so it could have to do with because I mean they're talking about organic matter as if that's the one determining factor when it's not on Earth.
Right. Yes. That's a very good point. Let's revisit the Curiosity rover here. I think it was 2015. I think that was 10 years ago. 2015. The Curiosity rover, when it discovered that organic matter that had until that point been in question whether or not it was there, it also discovered a very particular odd organic substance. It's odd simply because most people haven't heard of it. Believe me, I didn't either. The Curiosity rover. See, Nick, some of this wasn't in the film. I learned this after making the film.
Oh, nice.
And thus, I've continued the work on my YouTube channel. We can get to that later. The Curiosity rover discovered the organic matter, and it also discovered a very particular organic substance known as dimethyl sulfide. Okay. No one's heard of dimethyl sulfide.
I've heard of dimethyl sulfoxide.
Isn't it?
DMSL.
Isn't it what I mean, there were bacteria prior to the great oxidation event that were metabolizing or treating sulfide, disulfide, and that they were using rhodopsin and retinol to process the sun, and therefore our planet was purple and not blue. And so was that similar to the same bacteria, rhodopsin based?
You know, I'm not sure. That's outside of my expertise.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But here's what I can tell you. You guys know the James Webb Telescope, right? Okay, it's the fancy telescope NASA launched a few years ago that's able to image galaxies hundreds of millions of light years away, you know, back to the beginning of time, they say, and it's finding stuff so far away, perfect, crystal clear imagery sometimes. There's been some news articles that have been published within the past 6 months saying how researchers using the James Webb Telescope have found exoplanets, meaning planets orbiting stars millions of light years away, with what appear to be habitable atmospheres and signs of life. James Webb Telescope. You could just Google it right now. James Webb Telescope finds exoplanets with signs of life. Now, what is the James Webb Telescope looking for to make that claim that it has found signs of life?
Microbes.
Dimethyl sulfide. That's where that claim, that's how that claim is being based. It's the signature, a spectroscopic signature of dimethyl sulfide that they are finding in these exoplanets, which gets scientists on Earth really excited because that is a very strong biosignature. Why is it a very strong biosignature? If you go to NASA's website today, right now, on their website, even NASA admits there's only one way to make dimethyl sulfide, which is through active microbial activity. You need microbes. Microbes make dimethyl sulfide. That's the only process that makes dimethyl sulfide. Now, sure, you might get some scientists in lab coats in a laboratory cooking stuff up, but that doesn't count. Okay? It's the only natural process that makes dimethyl sulfide, and it's on Mars. So I think it's exciting that we're finding these biosignatures out in deep space, but we're finding the same biosignature right next door. Now, how come we're not making a bigger deal about that? Curiosity rover found this.
Yeah. I think the question here has less to do with is there life on Mars or anywhere else up there, but why is it not being talked about?
Mm-hmm.
And more so, why hasn't it been talked about? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember Art Bell used to talk about this all the time. On a weekly basis, sometimes in the 90s, they were having discussions about relative to what we're talking about today, about the findings of the day. And then when that show when he passed, it's like this narrative or people, it just stopped. So why weren't they talking about it then? Why aren't they talking about it now?
Well, it takes an awful lot of words to explain all that. I mean, we're sitting here 10 minutes later, just had to get all that out, and that's the condensed version. This discovery of microbes on Mars in 1976 was more or less seen as a public embarrassment for NASA because they got the public excited about going to NASA, about going to Mars and finding life. They said, look, we're going to go look for life. And then it came back inconclusive. And so they didn't want, here's the sad part. It's a lot of sad, but guess what? Okay, so the tests come back inconclusive, according to NASA in 1976. You might think, let's just send another one with better instruments 5-10 years later. Now, the question is, have they done that?
Yeah.
No.
That's right. They haven't, but they've made the public think that they have. They're sending robots, but nothing that they have sent since 1976 has been equipped with a direct life detection experiment. They're only looking at geology now. There's no biology tests that they're sending. So what they're looking for now are signs of ancient life. And that basically means we're looking at the rocks to see kind of how they evolved over the past few million years. But they're not actually directly looking for life. It wouldn't cost hardly anything to send something up there. They're just avoiding the question because they don't want another public embarrassment, or it's really opening up a whole can of worms because the textbooks for the past 50 years say there's no life on Mars. So they don't want to look silly. Now, this is a bit of speculation on my part, but I'm sitting here trying to think, what else could it be? Now, we'll skip over the rest. There's actually, okay, here's one other cool thing you guys may not have heard, and it kind of blew my mind, and I'm thinking, why haven't we followed up on this? NASA scientist, Dr. Carol Stoker, through the use of spectroscopy. Do you guys know what spectroscopy is? Lisa, you're shaking, you're nodding. What is? Can you explain spectroscopy?
You're looking at the refractance of a certain molecule, protein, whatever, that emits certain light at certain nanometers, and therefore you can kind of gauge its size or makeup or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Headless Giant, I see you nodded too.
Oh yeah, I was going to say spectroscopy can be used anytime you're looking up at an asteroid. You could tell the makeup of the minerals inside that asteroid by how it burns through the atmosphere, what colors it makes. It's a
right.
form of spectroscopy.
Right. Okay. Now this is a solid tool that very serious scientists use to try to figure out what the substance is made out of. Okay. They publish papers all the time. Here's what we found using spectroscopy. It is a credible tool. So NASA scientist, Dr. Carol Stoker, who still works at NASA today, through the use of spectroscopy, well, guess what she found on Mars? She found chlorophyll. Why hasn't anyone made a bigger deal about that? Now, is this proof? I'll just say it's evidence. But this is just where the story starts, folks. The boring microbe stuff. So, but you have the biologists over here in this camp, and you have independent researchers here. You have academics over here, and even Richard Hoover, who worked for NASA. Goodness, he had a whole lot of interesting things to say. They're not talking to each other. And they think by publishing a paper, the world's going to change tomorrow. But it doesn't. They don't really make good public relations experts. They're too busy doing science, too busy publishing the work. So I felt, look, I'm just a guy who knows storytelling. I felt like I could help elevate this material. And that's what I'm here doing with you guys today. I think you guys are a great audience. You're being so patient with me explaining all this stuff. But it's kind of complicated. So we've got the evidence for microbial life. Nick, you look like you were going to jump in and say something. Okay. We've got the evidence for microbial life. Some of you might remember, let's fast forward a little bit, to 1996, when Bill Clinton was president. Headless Giant, this might be what you were talking about before, but, well, in 1984, a team of NASA scientists went down to Antarctica, and, well, they do this all the time. They collect meteorites that fall to Earth. And Antarctica is a great place to look for them because it's just nothing but white, and you're looking for a black rock. It sticks out like a sore thumb. And long story short, they found an interesting meteorite, and they brought it back and did some analysis, and it wasn't really until 10 years later where they finally published what they found. And what they found was a Martian meteorite that contained what appeared to be a little tiny piece of bacteria in it. And this made so much, this was such a big story that it went all the way up to the White House. And Bill Clinton actually had a press conference on the White House lawn in 1996 about this rock having evidence for fossilized microbial life. Now, if you look at that image today, it looks like a little tiny worm, and sure, it could be, it couldn't be. There's some other reasons why it could be. And it's a really famous image, and I'll still see articles in my mainstream news feeds about scientists talking about this one particular rock. And it took the world by storm. But it, in and of itself, is highly controversial. And I'm sitting down there at the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, interviewing Professor Richard Hoover, who was NASA's lead astrobiologist at Marshall Space Flight Center. Guy's in his 80s now. And he tells me a little story about how when they discovered this particular meteorite, that he was shocked that everyone was making such a big deal about it because it was not the first meteorite to have been discovered to contain microfossils in it. He's like, this is crazy. Everybody knows there's microfossils in meteorites. I already knew that. Turns out, long story short, I did some homework on this, and they've been publishing on microfossils and meteorites since 1966. And here we could start a little show and tell, Nick, if you'd like. Here's an image. Let me just, okay, so I said, Professor Hoover, you're telling me that we've known about microfossils since 1966? He's like, yes. In fact, I've published on a number of them myself. And I said, well, how come I never heard about this? He says, I don't know. NASA just didn't want to talk about it. I said, well, if there only was a picture, because the picture from that most famous meteorite that went to Bill Clinton, this one called the Allen Hills meteorite, okay, I said, if there only was a picture, And I'm sitting there at Longhorn Steakhouse at lunch with them. I said, if there only was a picture, he goes, huh. He whips out his tablet and shows me something. And I'm going to show you what he showed me. Let me present here. Share screen. Yes, share screen. Here we go. Screen 2, is it? Yes. Bear with me. Here we go.
Yeah, no problem.
Here we go. Okay, guys, you tell me. What does that look like to you? Can you guys see that?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Are these a picture of the same thing, just one's like zoomed in?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's okay. What I'll tell you what specifically these things are, Julia. These are actually two different samples, but yes, one is zoomed in further.
Yes.
It looks like they are flagelli in that one on the right, and then some other sort of organelles on the one on the left.
They look like gills or vacuoles or vents.
Here, let me ask you a simple question. Does this look like a rock or does this look like life?
Oh,
It looks like a parasite.
Yeah.
Almost.
Oh, yeah.
Alien eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. What you're seeing here are fossilized. These were not living when these were discovered. But what you're seeing here are known as diatoms. Has anyone heard of a diatom? Okay, see a couple people nodding. Lisa, what is a diatom?
It is a unicellular organism that is probably one of the most abundant organisms that has existed throughout the history of the Earth.
Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, diatoms produce about half of the oxygen that we breathe here on Earth.
Oh.
They're found in the sea. These things are used for, due to their excellent filtration qualities, you can grind these things up and you can use them. You guys ever have a pool or know someone who has a pool? Sometimes you hear that they have these kind of filtration systems called DE filtering, diatomaceous earth. That's ground up diatoms.
We use that to kill insects as well. Diatomaceous earth you can sprinkle around your garden, and they'll cut up the legs and insides of the insects. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's just cut up.
You can take it. You can take it as an herbal supplement as well. It gets rid of parasites in your gut.
Oh, interesting. So they've got some uses for it, but diatoms are quite common. And here, what we see on the left here is two complete diatoms.
Why are they on top of each other?
Because as Richard
because they're getting nasty.
That's
how they make new diatoms. Is this is the mating ritual, and that's how they do it.
If you got ejected from Mars's atmosphere, you would find the closest person next to you and hug them as hard as you could as well.
Yes, I believe what just happened here was that they reproduced and that they were simply just frozen in time this way. And what we see here on the right is a fragment just zoomed in even further. I mean, these things look like ribs. But I looked at this image and I'm like, how come the world hadn't seen this image? This is clearly, to the naked eye, to the untrained eye, rather, much more easily discernible as being life, instead of the most famous meteorite, Allen Hills, being talked about by Bill Clinton, which is a magnificent discovery in its own right. But you don't need a degree to look at this and be like, you know what? That's life. Now, again, this is fossilized. Okay. So the main critique, and by the way, the meteorite that these were in is known as the Orgueil meteorite. It's a French word because it fell in this town of Orgueil in France in 1864. All right. This is a known meteorite. But the common criticism is, well, this is just terrestrial contamination. These are not extraterrestrial microbes. These are just little critters that hopped into the rock after the rock fell down to Earth. Well, there's a problem. These are fossils. Fossils don't hop. Number one. Number two, there's no nitrogen content in these things. Now, what's the big deal about that? Every living thing has nitrogen in it. Nitrogen depletes from an organism, but it takes a really long time, thousands or millions of years. So these things have been dead for a very long time. These things did not just hop into the rock, into the inside of a rock. I mean, my God, how absurd. There's an astronomer who was kind of famous, Phil Plait, the bad astronomer. He was talking about this, criticizing this for that reason. I'm like, Phil Plait, you got to know the difference between a living organism and a fossil. So it's surprising to me why something like this isn't getting more attention. And this particular meteorite that fell in France in 1864, isotopic data highly suggest that this was a Martian meteorite. Okay, so there's our first bit of evidence, and there's more. There are more photos. That's just the best example that I've got to share with people. Now, when you have the lead, the guy running the astrobiology department at one of NASA's facilities, saying he's discovered on multiple occasions multiple microorganisms from extraterrestrial meteorites, why are we not listening to him? Now, he retired in 2012 because he said the NASA that he started working for in 1966 was not the same NASA that he was working for in 2012. And unfortunately, this research got to be a thorn in the side of NASA, who didn't really want to embrace it. They couldn't refute it, but they really didn't want to talk about it. The question is why? We can only speculate, but all of this research basically led to his retirement. And I do a deep dive with him, and he tells the whole story about the back and forth, what the events leading up to his retirement, these discoveries, and how they just didn't want him to talk about it. And so I was able to capture his story on my YouTube channel for those who care. I mean, it's a really long interview, but this guy is brilliant. You listen to him talk, and it's like, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. This guy, Richard Hoover, has been studying diatoms for decades. He's an expert on diatoms. He's an expert on scanning electron microscopy. He's an expert on biology. The guy knows what he's talking about. So
I had a quick question there.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
About the nature of these diatoms. Are they a separate species from any of the other known diatoms on Earth? I know there's a lot of variety in diatoms themselves because they have that, carapace that comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. But is this separate from all the species on Earth? That's I think that should be one of the questions, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And thank you for bringing that up, because diatoms do come in all shapes and sizes. They just don't look like this. But some of them look like this, okay? And, Nick, George Howard is familiar with diatoms and meteorites, and we've talked about this at length. Nick, you guys know George Howard, the Cosmic Summit organizer. Quite often, a lot of what diatoms actually look like, it's so funny how he refers to them, Nick. He says diatoms typically look like little tiny spaceships. They're so interesting looking. So
what does the expert say about what was happening in that picture you just showed us? Was that two of them just happened to be next to each other, or were they actually in the process of reproducing life?
Yes, Richard Hoover believes that they had just finished. I guess it's asexual reproduction. I don't know too much about how they reproduce, but to find, I'll tell you this much, to find two of them like that next to each other is rare. I mean, I don't know if you could really find another photograph like that, fossilized diatom, two of them like that. He might have only ever seen one other. For those interested in learning more about these diatoms and the work of this guy, I went down and I had to go interview him again after the film came out because he has so much to say. I've got a whole nearly 5-hour long interview with this guy. He could tell you. It's titled "The History of Microfossils and Meteorites from 1966 to 2000 to present day." No, it's 1961, even earlier. Like people were working on it even before him. And I'm like, how come we haven't heard about this stuff? It took us till 1996 to find out about this stuff. That's ridiculous.
Can I
And
say
again,
that it seems to me, even with what you've presented here, which I know is the partial presentation of the totality of the information that you assimilated, it leads one, as you've suggested, to kind of say without hesitance that their silence and their omission of further research speaks volumes, in a sense, that you don't try to hide something that doesn't exist. And it seems to me that there is something that they're obfuscating, right? It seems to me something is being hidden. I don't know what, but I wonder if in your research you might have heard rumors, as because it seems like other people must, suggest the same kind of pattern.
yeah, Ethan, basically that's the whole line of questioning with everything that's in the film. Why aren't they not acknowledging this? Why not that? Why not this? Why not that? And if we could even bring a specific example of NASA's, I don't know if this really helps inform the discussion, but some of you might be familiar with the fact that NASA has been artificially coloring their images of Mars for decades, making the planet appear a lot more red than it actually is. I see a lot of nodding heads.
They do that with a lot of images. It makes all of their stories seem far less credible.
I actually have a question about that very thing.
Yes.
Maybe you cleared this up in the beginning. I don't know. I came in late, so you can just let me know. Would you consider yourself to be like a conspiracy theory guy, a spiritual guy, like a sci-fi kind of guy? I just want to know how to proceed with this question because I don't want to take the train too far off the tracks because I'm full blown. Like there's probably something wrong with me. My bread's not all the way cooked. I don't want to freak you out. What would you say you're a conspiracy theory guy or?
No, but I'll tell you this much. After going down this rabbit hole and meeting a whole bunch of interesting people and seeing what's being reported on, I'm certainly entertaining a lot more these days than I used to.
Okay. Okay.
The whole microbe thing really does point to they have a narrative they are not willing to step on.
Well, I think they found something else
There's
the first
something.
time they discovered the microbes. They got up there and they discovered the microbes. That's great. But they probably discovered something else too. There's probably a whole underground civilization on that motherfucker chilling on the inside, some type of journey to the center of the earth shit with waterfalls and fucking butterflies and everything. And they won't even talk about the microbes because when you talk about the microbes, then you got to admit that there's some shit going on that goes way beyond finding the microbes. There's probably like some kind of catastrophe that happened to Mars and fucked it all up and it drove the people inside. And we're just finding like the remnants of their life in the ecosystem and everything, like little fossilized fragments on the surface, and all those bitches is in there chilling on the inside, laughing. Every time we send a rover, it's like, you think they're going to find us? And it's like, no, because they won't even talk about the microbes. Anyways, this is a very fascinating presentation. I always knew there was something wrong with Mars.
There's got to be something. There's something bigger. There's something bigger that is being hidden here. That's what I feel
what
that
I'm
way
saying,
too.
Tim.
I mean, I agree. Yeah, I don't know about the waterfalls. Maybe we can disagree.
They got waterfalls.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I like the waterfalls.
They got everything.
No, but like if there's micro fossils in the meteorites from Mars, then maybe that suggests Mars has an atmosphere, which maybe explains why there's Cydonia and a sphinx up there with a headdress and a symmetrical face on what used to be the pole of Mars.
Thank you, Tim. That's what I'm talking about. There was a whole civilization. Something happened to them, just like in Earth's history, where all the ancient civilizations talk about a massive flood event. Every civilization, doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be biblical. They talk about the flood story, how they were driven underground into tunnels because they were avoiding this cataclysm. I think something similar happened on Mars, and it drove the people inside. Anyways, like I said, I don't want to take the train too far off the tracks, but I have always been fascinated with that because I think that they've known about something for a long time, and the microbes are just like the beginning of it. I think they're hiding so much, like it would change human history if they were ever to announce what they've really found.
Brian,
Well,
may I ask if you mentioned chlorophyll earlier, and I think I know the answer to this, but that can that be found when it's ancient, or is it something it must have been an ongoing chemical process?
The only thing that was published on this, Ethan, was an abstract, a paragraph. NASA, someone who is more informed about the situation relayed to me that NASA said, you can't publish on this any further. So all we got is an abstract, but at least we got that.
I will say that diatoms, you have algae classified as diatoms, and algae utilize chlorophyll to photosynthesize. So you do have that, and that could be it. I'll insert this. I do think that a majority of scientists are myopic in their view of what life, the definition of life is. No one wants to call a bacterial cell life because it almost gives the air of we are insignificant because there is so much life around. Life is teeming, it's bacteria. But when you start to call bacteria life, the newspaper should say life found on Mars. And it doesn't, because it's not going to call bacteria life, even though it is. And the other thing is that when we consider only be carbon-based, we have further become more myopic in our definition. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well said, Lisa. Well said. And Julia, you were sort of dancing around exactly what this whole film's about. Okay. I mean, again, we're just on the boring microbe stuff. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the juicy. This is not juicy relative to the other stuff. Okay. Now what we can do here is we can pivot to something else here. Okay. Again, let's remind ourselves, if this planet was once blue and we're talking about microbes, well, then the next question is, well, is there anything bigger than microbes that was ever on Mars? Turns out we got some interesting photos. Let me cue something else up for you guys.
So I was going to bring this up, but I didn't know if you didn't want to cover it and leave it for the movie.
Hey, we got time.
Yeah. It was like Julia's talking about stuff.
You just tell me when to stop talking, dude. Okay, listen.
Did I put the cart before the horse? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I didn't want to ruin the presentation.
We did a teaser. It's okay.
Okay.
We got a teaser going.
Okay.
But we're gonna get there. But first, have you guys? Let me ask you this. Just nod your head if any of you guys have ever heard of something called a crinoid.
It's a new one.
I did once. I saw your show.
Okay.
No
worry.
cheating, Nick.
No,
Don't be
don't
answering
worry.
I'm trying to learn some shit over here.
All right. So, Nick, I just shared something here. Okay. So, what we see here is something called a crinoid. It's a sea creature. I call it, it's like a flowery starfish. Okay. They are quite common. If you're a marine biologist, you know exactly what a crinoid is. Now, what you see on the left is a fossil of what is called a stalked crinoid, a stalk. So that part on the left would typically go down and anchor itself into the seabed. Okay, so it's sideways now because we have a comparison. Okay, so it looks like a plant, but it's actually an animal. Sea creatures are funny that way. All right, now what you will see is you see the stalk coming up. And while it might be hard to tell, let me see if I can zoom into it. It's can you guys see my mouse?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So this process of branching out here is called bifurcation. You know, it splits, it bifurcates. Okay. So what I'm going to show you next are two different images. One is on Mars and one is on Earth. And I want to see if you guys can guess which one is which. Okay? All right. So we have something here on the left. We have something here on the right. Now, can you guys see? Basically, we have a stem here. This one's curved, but it's bifurcating right here. And over here, we have a stem, and it's bifurcating right here. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many people think the one on the left is from Earth?
I'll say that one's Earth. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And on the right,
I would guess
That's
that
right.
one.
I
Okay.
think
know,
the
but
Are you guys-
I think the
right
left is
side.
from Mars.
okay.
You think the left is from Mars? Me too.
The one
Right.
on the right looks like the same stem from the picture that you just showed.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of does look similar. Well, the one on the left is from Mars, and one on the right is from Earth.
Nice.
Okay. Now,
It's the definition.
what was claimed was that NASA, hello, NASA, the Opportunity rover in 2004 took this image, the one that you see here on the left. This thing is only about 3 or 4 inches big. It's really not that big. Okay. Now, this image, I caught wind of this image through, I have to credit here the partner I worked with on the film. His name is Michael Craig. He's in England. He was my subject matter expert and producer, and he knew all about this stuff. So he told me a lot about what I presented in the film, what we both presented in the film. So I took this image, and I'm like, you know what? I want to know what an expert thinks about this image, but I'm not going to give him any context. So this image here on the left, and I sourced this. It's cropped here for this presentation, but I sourced this directly back to NASA's website. I sent it to a paleontologist who specializes in marine biology, marine fossilized biology. I sent it to a paleontologist at the University of Cincinnati. And to be kind, I won't mention his name. And I just asked him what he thought of it. And he said, oh, this is an interesting sample. This looks either like a sea lily or a crinoid. Where did you get this specimen? I'm like, okay. And I told him I got it from NASA's website because it's an image from Mars. Never heard back from the guy. So that was all I needed as a filmmaker to say, you know what, there's legitimacy to the claim that this thing is a crinoid on Mars.
Right. But there's an interesting factor as well. The one on the left is more three-dimensional. It's a more defined image than the one on the right, which is pressed in, indicating there must have been less pressure or less gravity in making that, and there is less gravity on Mars, so you would have more definition to that photograph because it has more room in the process of becoming fossilized.
It's certainly possible.
I like that. If I could add to that, because you mentioned, Brian, you mentioned Graham Hancock earlier. If I'm remembering correctly, he has said that there's no doubt that Mars once had dense and possibly an Earth-like atmosphere with life, with oceans, rivers, and rivers that ran for a very long time that etched like deep channels into the surface of Mars. If that's true, I mean, is that what we're looking at evidence of?
Yeah, it's certainly plausible, and that's the point. Is that if the planet had oceans, lakes, and rivers, thus most likely sea life, water life, the question is, would it look anything like Earth life, right? Well, there's also the equally legitimate question, why wouldn't it look like Earth life? Because
I'm with you on that one. I think it would be similar.
Well, history shows that over millions of years, Earth and Mars have essentially, I like this term, swapped spit Okay, rocks from one planet end up on the other. Okay, back and forth. This happens. All right. You guys remember, 65 million years ago, big meteor comes down, hits the Earth, kills all the dinosaurs. I know there's some dinosaur conspiracies and all that kind of stuff, but we're not getting into that today. Okay, big rock hits the Earth, launches a bunch of material up into the atmosphere. A lot of that material is going to rain back down on the Earth. Some of it might orbit the Earth a little bit, but some of it's going to get launched so far, so hard out into space that it's just going to keep going because it has enough escape velocity to escape the gravity of Earth. And yeah, some of it might end up on Mars. So we do know there's been this exchange of material. Now, what you're seeing here is the actual full image. All right. And you can see it right here. It doesn't really look at a glance. This is a really boring photo. Now, if you were NASA, what would you do if you discovered a potential fossil in the side of a rock? You're not sure, but you think it might be something, so you might want to take a closer look. Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, what did NASA do?
Nothing. Probably.
They ground it down to nothing.
Oh, come on. I see now the conspiracy theorist is just bursting out of me. I can't with this. You know why they do stuff like that? Because they don't want people to know about shit. That's why they do stuff like that. I don't think NASA is the good guys, but maybe I'm in the minority here or whatever with that, but why would you do that? Why would you purposely ground it down so that we can't ever see it again?
It's a government-wide policy of not accepting that there's life in outer space. It's on every level. They always deny it. And so NASA is just another government agency. They have to deny it.
So Richard Hoover tells me the story because he was working at NASA at the time this was discovered. Again, he's the lead astrobiologist at NASA Marshall, and he called NASA headquarters and he asked essentially one of the lead scientists at NASA headquarters, a guy named David McKay, why did you guys ground into this thing? They used what's called a rock abrasion tool to grind into it. And Richard Hoover recounts this telephone conversation he had with the lead scientist at NASA headquarters, who told him, well, we were grinding into it to see if it contained any carbon.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Now,
I'm not buying that brand of bologna today. That is the most ridiculous. I cannot even. They take advantage of people trusting them because it's NASA. It's like, you can't question us. We're NASA. It's not like you could be smarter than us because you're just a retard and you don't work for NASA. But they say stuff like that, and it's like, I'm sorry. I don't buy that. Like, why would you ground it down to nothing? They don't do that with the archaeologists in Egypt when they're digging up all those fucking tombs and shit. Oh, we found a skeleton. Let's grind it down to nothing so we can see if where's the logic in that? I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense.
Julia, that's exactly the response. That's exactly the appropriate response. There's no logic to it. And as Professor Hoover recounts in his story, his reaction to that lead scientist, David McKay, he says, what? Because David McKay, who was part of the team responsible for analyzing the Allen Hills meteorite, one Bill Clinton talked about, he was a geologist who, of course, knew paleontology. And imagine finding a dinosaur skull. This is what Professor Hoover talks about. He's like, imagine finding a dinosaur skull. It's fossilized, okay? So if you crack it open with your hammer, you're not going to find brains inside of it anymore. It's all been turned to rock. So he got a nonsense answer. One NASA astrobiologist to another is feeding him bullshit. So within 3 hours, this was ground down to nothing. Now, there's a little bit more to the story, and I'll tease that because we actually got some... Interestingly, grinding it down provided us some extra evidence that this thing is in fact a crinoid. That's the teaser. You can go check out the film to finish this story. It's quite an
So
interesting.
their evil plan backfired.
Hey, you know what? Look, we're talking about a bunch of cool stuff here on Mars, and I wanted to try to do my due diligence and give NASA a chance to respond to everything that was in the film. But guess what? They didn't want to talk to me.
Nope.
JPL.
No, they're not going to talk to you.
JPL did not want to talk to me. Okay. And 3 other institutions that I went to did not want to talk to me. So what am I supposed to do? Because I'll hear people from time to time saying, well, your documentary is not balanced. It doesn't include the other side. Well, guess what? The other side didn't want to talk to me.
Right.
So
Yeah, they're either going to not respond, or they're going to, in the case of Spielberg, they sent him a 40-page letter on why he should not release Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, because they didn't want that information out, or they're just not going to respond.
So, you know, I tried, guys. I tried. I'm not going to go over everything that's in the film, but we can hit one or just a couple more kind of exciting things just to advance this conversation. And by the way, that's not the only example of a fossil on Mars. We talk about more in the film. I've learned about even more since the film has come out. Julie, I guess to answer your question a little bit more extensively here, I don't go to bat for something unless I got the receipts. Now, I take it just by the general vibe of the room here that it seems like these receipts are working for those who I call the uninitiated. You guys have never heard about this stuff because I didn't hear about this stuff either. And when I did, I'm like, what the hell, man? And again, this is really just kind of the beginning of the story, because there is a story about Mars. I think, Julie, you were alluding to that. If there was, like, because we think, ooh, Mars is this planet, maybe there was life there in the past, maybe there were people there. Well, if there was, wouldn't there be remnants? Okay, and here we have what arguably is evidence for biological remnants. Now, what about non-biological remnants? Like, what are we talking about there? Okay, there's no shortage of people online talking about interesting things they might have found in photographs from rover images. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, the
right.
pyramids.
Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. Before we get there, though, let me show you this image, okay? Let me just show you. Here's one of dozens examples of rover photographs that at first glance don't really look too interesting. Because what do you guys remember about rover photographs? Boring, just a bunch of rocks. Next, right? Move like, okay, what's the big deal?
That's a foundation.
Now, I'm gonna blow this up a little bit more. Can you guys just take a close look at this photograph and see if there's any particular object in here that just doesn't seem like the rest?
Is this something
shit,
big I'm looking at, or is this something microscopic I'm looking at?
This is just like you're looking at the side of a hill.
It does stick out like a sword. See it.
This is a rover image, Julia. So you're basically looking at a hill that's, let's say 10, 15 meters away or something.
Oh yeah,
You got a can?
the lower right corner.
Is this
Like a
some Where's
cone.
Waldo shit? I can't see anything.
Okay, don't worry, Julia, don't worry. Okay, so some of you are seeing this thing. Okay, some of you are seeing this thing right here. Julia, do you see that right here?
Okay, yeah, I see it.
Now, I'll zoom in just a second, but how would you describe what you're seeing there, and why is your eye drawn to it? Tim, Ethan, anybody else?
It's too uniform to be natural, right? It's too complex of a smooth shape.
how would you
Symmetry.
and how would you describe the overall landscape here?
Irregular.
Rugged.
Yeah, isn't it? All right, so what is it? This one? Nope. Okay, there's a guy in Israel who does some image processing. He's an independent Mars researcher. He does nothing else in his spare time but sift through thousands and thousands of Mars rover images. His name is Rami Bar-Alan. You'll see it there in the right lower hand corner there. And Rami, if you're watching, God bless you, buddy. You do some amazing work. He found this thing. See, that's the thing. NASA took the picture, but NASA doesn't talk about the picture. They just publish it. They're legally obligated to publish, but they don't got to say shit. And they don't want to, because that opens up a whole can of worms. How do you have something that appears to be, well, now what does this look like? I'm not even going to characterize it. How would you guys describe this?
How big
How
is
big
this?
is this? How
Yeah.
big is this thing that I'm looking at right here?
Well, it's an object that you can see from 10 or 15 meters away. So I don't have the exact measurements, but it's big enough to be spotted by the naked eye from, let's say, 10 or 15 meters away.
That's actually a
Okay.
traffic cone from Earth, and I'm sorry, it was an accident.
Oh, so that's how big it is? It's like the size of a traffic cone?
It might be. Now,
It
I've got
looks like it would be part of a mechanical of some sort of operation on a machine.
That's
I'll
a pipe. It's like
okay,
a pipe coming out of the ground.
That's what
kinda
I was going to say.
yeah.
It looks like a pipe. That's how the motherfuckers get from the surface to the inner earth. They use these pipe systems. They got systems. You guys are laughing and you know they have systems. That's how they be getting back and forth with
So-
the
It's
pipes.
actually it's a slushy. It's a slushy.
They don't have slushies. They're very health conscious on Mars. Headless.
I'll tell you how I'm interpreting this image. Not as a pipe, but as a column
Oh,
buried. A column that's fallen over. This is just what it looks like to me. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's just what it looks like to me. It looks like a column fell over. Because what do we see here? We see smooth on that surface, on this surface, and this is
yeah, that's pretty impressive right there. The
that's
circular.
pretty.
It
damn
even has a
circular.
shadow.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Is there a scale on this thing so that
I'm sorry, I don't have a scale with me. It's Rami might be better. Rami's got a whole website dedicated to this stuff. This is one of his amazing finds. Okay. But
'cause it
Rami's
looks
over
like it's in
there.
a stone circle. If you look around at the outside, it looks like a stone circle.
Well, yeah, it looks like a perfect circle here on the end. Is that what you're saying?
No, out on the outside of it. If this thing is huge, like a megalith on its side, there are
Yeah.
a bunch of little rocks on the outside that would indicate like a stone circle that they have on Earth.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So
So
if that's like, 30 meters across and it's fallen over, that could be, a good indicator
Look.
of what that is.
this was taken by the Opportunity rover. Certainly we've had other rovers there, but the question is, why did we not go take a closer look? Why didn't we drive the rover closer to this thing? And the only answer I could possibly imagine, other than, well, we're just not interested, we're going to pretend we didn't see that, is a plausible explanation might be, well, we don't want the rover to get stuck. But guess what? These rovers are designed to literally drive over rocks. Okay, and I show that in the film. You can see these things driving over rocks that are this big. And there doesn't appear to be much standing in the way of a rover. And that interesting thing there. Why not get a zoom lens on it at least, right? We're just going to let that one go. Okay, again, this is just one of dozens of rover images. I could spend all night on just rover images, but I'm not going to, because we got other interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, you do have a lot of movie, just for the people to hear. He has a lot of images of weird shit on Mars. So.
Yeah, lots of weird shit. Okay, so let's talk about. Okay, one more rover image, just one more, because now, as you guys might suspect, these rover images, some of them are taken at quite high resolution. Okay, but they show a giant landscape like what we just saw. But unfortunately, when you spot something that's odd and you zoom into it, what happens when you zoom into an image? Sometimes it
It becomes
becomes
all
Oh,
pixelated
it's-
and
right.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So a lot of the time, what these Mars independent researchers do is denoise and try to get rid of some of the pixelizations, but retaining the ultimate quality or the characterization of the objects. Okay. So they might adjust some of the contrast and things like that, but they're not changing the fundamental shape of these things that they present. Okay. And I've seen the before and after. Again, I wouldn't go to bat for this if I didn't believe in their work. It's not really mischaracterizing it. So here's another interesting image. Again, this is blurry, but kind of cleaned up. And you tell me what this looks like. One of the strongest pieces of photographic evidence. Photographs are evidence. When people say there's absolutely no evidence, blah, 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 well, here's a photograph. And a photograph, you submit that in a court of law as evidence. Here you go, Your Honor. Here's a photograph of the guy stabbing that other guy. Here's you go. There it is. Okay. What do you guys see here? It's loading.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Yeah, I remember this one too. I was like, "Oh, what the fuck is that?" It's like the tires fell off of a truck or some shit.
Now, I can't tell you exactly how big this is. This is just one of many things in a giant landscape. We had to zoom really far into it, just the contrast, just a little bit. But if you look at the unaltered photograph, you will see this in there. And it's barely observable just because there's so much else in there. But I've done it. I've sourced the image and I looked at it, and this is just a cleaned up version of what you find in there. Regardless of what you might think it is, what shape does it have?
A
Circular.
circle.
I've got a barbell in the other room that looks like that.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say.
That is an ancient barbell from the Inner Earth people.
You said there are health questions.
I'm sorry, Inner
Yeah.
Mars people. Inner Mars people.
But
They
you know,
left
depending on
some-
how big it is, it could be a structure too, or you know, a
That-
double domed structure with like a little hallway in between or something.
That's clearly an engine from one of those John Carter airships that blew up in that
Yeah.
area.
I
So-
think it looks like it came off a horse and buggy or something ancient like
Yeah,
that.
wheels and axle.
It
Given-
does look like wheels and axle to me.
It looks like a kid's toy wheels.
Mhm.
I'll tell you what it don't look like. It don't look like some random rocks and dirt and shit that they say that's like that's all Mars has on it. It definitely reeks of there was something else going on here.
Definite manipulation.
Yeah, and this is probably just maybe a foot large, just given my estimation based on the image, the big image. I don't have it in front of me, but the big image that I've seen of this. But again, you got to credit these guys. They're looking at an image with tons of shit in it, and they're just taking their time, meticulously scanning everything. Oh, wait, that looks odd. Let's zoom up on there, clean it up. Rami, again, from Israel. Nobody knows this guy, but there is a thriving Mars. I shouldn't say thriving. There is an existing Mars community that does this kind of work, and they are owed a debt of gratitude for spending their spare time finding these things for the rest of us to enjoy. So my goal is to try to highlight their work and elevate it for the rest of us to see, so that this story of Mars starts to crystallize. So let's just move on to something a little bit bigger.
Can I say something, Brian?
Yes.
You know what I think of the Mars story is like I look at it like in 100 years from now or whenever some type of huge cataclysm hits Earth and all the rich elite assholes take off, they repopulate somewhere else, and whenever they get to that planet, they just forget about Earth and act like it never existed. And then eventually, like generations later, they're taking rovers and they're putting them on Earth, and they're finding like Taco Bell sporks, and they're like, look at this, there was life on this planet. Like, I'm serious, this is what we're finding on Mars. And we're like, what is this, what is that? And like back then it was they probably had megalithic structures, they probably had school buses, they probably had life, they probably had a routine, families, all that, animal husbandry, all of it. But it was wiped out, it was decimated, and now we're just finding the Taco Bell sporks. But I think that Earth, very, very well, something like that could happen to us, and
Brian,
thing gets decimated, and they have to start over somewhere else. I mean, I think this is a very real possibility.
We're getting there, Julie. We're getting there.
Because these images aren't optical illusions or natural features. I don't think I think that's a big telltale for me. And it's like, I don't know, Brian, if you ever heard of Dr. Tom Flandern, but he was
Tom Van Flandern, yes.
He's like a doctor of astronomy, or was a doctor of astronomy for Yale. And he did a 3-year study on this stuff, including, I think, the face on Mars. And that's kind of what that study was showing, was that it's not optical illusion and it's not natural feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For tonight, the face on Mars is going to take too much time to cover, but there is something to it beyond it just looking like it might be a face. There is actually quantitative data, numbers and shit, measurements and stuff that indicate it was designed with symmetry and geometry in mind. We touch upon it in the film. You can talk. I interviewed Dr. Mark Carlotta, who talks a lot about that. Another one of these guys back in the 80s analyzing this stuff. And I'm currently at work on producing a follow-up for my YouTube channel, specifically on the face of Mars, because I've learned even more about it since I finished the film. And I'm like, holy shit, how I need to do more on this. The world needs to know about this stuff. So I'm actually driving up to New Jersey to meet a guy, Matt Barone. He has a Curious Dimension podcast. Great guy who just so happens to be a geometry teacher. And we're going to talk about the significance of the geometry of the face on Mars in this video. So we're going to save that for later for now.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the face on Mars, there's other pictures, and I think the ones that you've shown today are great. And in fact, that last one you just showed, or the last two you just showed, I saw shadows. Mm-hmm. I saw shadows in the last one too, and I don't know that optical illusions have shadows. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, these are photographs, man. You can pull them from NASA. So let's move on to something a little bit bigger. Okay, now in 1976, you guys know Carl Sagan.
Oh yeah.
You guys remember the original Cosmos series?
Oh god, yes, yeah.
1980. Okay. You can find it on DVD still. There's an entire episode about Mars. And at the very end of that episode, Carl Sagan is talking about photographs taken from the orbiters that NASA sent to Mars. So satellites taking pictures from space of the surface of Mars, photographing some interesting structures. And Carl Sagan himself, in his book Cosmos and the TV series Cosmos, uses the word pyramids. I'm going to show you some of these interesting structures. I cannot say with certainty that they are pyramids, but I'm wondering what natural geological method forms these things. I don't have a solid answer on that. I'm going to show you just a couple of these things. You tell me, okay? So if anyone wants to criticize me or anybody else in the Mars community for using the word pyramids, well, we got to go back and we got to listen to Carl Sagan. He's the one characterizing them as such. And we all love Carl Sagan. He's a well-respected scientist. God bless him. He's not with us. But anyway, let me share with you this. So let's rewind the clock back to 1976. NASA sends these landers down to the planet, takes these measurements and photos. By the way, it took a picture of snowfall on Mars. It snows on Mars. There's clouds on Mars. H2O.
They have Christmas on Mars. I'm telling you, they're in the ground.
The
Damn,
atmosphere of
There's no
Mars is
spring.
like, right? Well, the atmosphere of Mars is said to be so thin that it's not supposed to be able to produce clouds. That's what they always say. But
Well,
There they
NASA's
are.
got photographs of them. You know, they just don't talk about this stuff, and that's the surprising. Anyway, off on water. So they send these orbiters. Also, the Viking orbiters are taking pictures in 1976, and yes, that's where we get the original face on Mars photograph. Okay, but they also started taking pictures of other parts of the planet. And Nick, I'm going to share it again here. They took a picture here.
Look at this shit.
Yeah, it's like very circular.
Yeah, but the little thingy beside it.
Okay,
Look
so
at this thing.
the big circle on top, what is that?
No idea.
I mean,
Maybe a
that could be a
crater?
crater.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an impact crater. You can see all the ejected material, right? That's been scattered all around it, right?
right,
This thing down here does not have any of that ejected material on top of it. I don't know what this looks like to you, but I'm seeing some kind of an indication here that this thing is not perfectly circular. You know how you look at a volcano from the top down? It's circular. It doesn't have what appear to be sides. And logic would present that if this structure was there before the meteor came down and made that big hole, would it still be standing? Being so close to it?
No. Mm-mm.
So therefore,
Oh my God, it's new. They came out of the tunnel system and they built it and they went back. See, you guys ought to just let me tell you about Mars. I knew it.
That's the gym.
I knew
That's
it.
the gym. They're using the barbell in there.
Yes.
It almost looks like they built a tower to mine whatever was in that circle, whether it was water or
Ooh, Lisa, you
Cory.
are you
when
are
they do quarries
correct.
in the earth, they place gins or mills right alongside it, don't they?
so it's interesting. You know, it's not for me to speculate, but who knows, Lisa? You know, let's talk about the size of this for a second. That crater is 2.5 miles wide.
Oh my God.
That's big.
So that means this structure has got to be huge. You know, Brian's got this whole like very soothing, like Jeff Goldblum thing going on with his voice, and he's very like articulate. And I feel like I'm learning a lot right now, but this is the kind of stuff that makes me go crazy, and he should present this stuff and not me, because it infuriates me. It's like to look at this and then say, oh, it's just like a sea urchin or whatever they say it is, some type of microbacterial sand particle, whatever. It's like, no way, dude, that's a pyramid. That is a pyramid. Somebody built that thing. Where are they?
That it looks a lot like burial mounds, and trust me, I've had my share of looking at Google Earth aerial images of burial mounds in Tennessee and Kentucky, and that's what that looks like.
So, guys, believe it or not, we were lucky enough, us Mars people, to have gifted to us just within the past 6 months an updated photo of this structure. They re-imaged this structure almost 50 years later. This is from the mid 70s. This photo here, high contrast, low resolution. But guess what? They took another picture of it, I think, within the past 6 months.
Oh shit.
Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here. Can I zoom in? Here. Now, while
This looks crazy.
I don't have a wider landscape image of this, but there are no other large mound-like, mountain-like, volcano-like structures anywhere near this for miles and miles. There's nothing. This is the only thing that sticks up out of the ground. Now, again, to me, to my eye, and tell me if I'm seeing things. It kind of looks like there are sides. Look at this shadow. It is triangular. It is not circular. It doesn't, yes, it has an arc over here, but here there's a distinct line. You know, and whenever we see the Egyptian pyramids, we are seeing shadows with distinct lines. Now, you might say, okay, after all of that evidence, you might still say, well, it doesn't look like a perfect pyramid.
It's a pentagon.
It got fucked up with the water erosion when the catastrophe hit. That's what it is.
And so keep this in mind. The surface of Mars is old. It doesn't have much of an atmosphere, but it has just enough of an atmosphere to blow around sand and dust. And so if any of you guys have ever seen an unexcavated pyramid, what does an unexcavated pyramid look like? It just looks like a hill with dirt on it, sometimes trees, sometimes you don't have no idea there's a pyramid underneath. So
there is a square on this too that's sticks out to me. It just looks too
Like
perfect.
a window.
It looks like almost like, talk about geometry. It looks like almost a perfect square. And yeah, it looks like it's a cavern.
Yeah.
Good eye.
That's a great catch, Ethan. That's a great catch.
The top of the pyramid, and looking at, like, when you look at remote sensing of vegetation, it looks like the top part is either weather worn, like a wind type worn. But what's interesting is the pattern of the surface outside of the pyramid over to the right and left hand side. It almost looks like water erosion of sorts, or vegetation that has grown in patterns and then frozen into the land. But it does have some sort of vegetative water-esque pattern to it on the side.
Lisa, do you know, you might be familiar with this. You know the pyramid in Mexico that's like buried, it looks like a hill. I think it's Cholula. It's in Cholula,
Yes.
So they didn't know that was a pyramid for like the longest. I don't think they thought it was just a big ass grassy ass hill, and then they started looking into it. Right. That, like, does that not remind you kind of like of what we're looking at right now? It's just like been buried a little bit, covered up, but
That
you
looks
can
like
kind of
the
see the
before.
remnants.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a before and after of that pyramid you're talking about. And that looks like the before picture before they excavated it.
Right. Yeah.
There's definitely ribbing on the four, like a four-sided on this one.
So let's just say, okay, so what I'm showing you are samples, right? I could spend all day and night showing you everything, okay? I'm just showing you some of the best stuff. Now, maybe let's just say this one doesn't work for you, okay? Let's take a look at this next one.
Wow.
Come on.
Wow.
Look at this shit.
If you were to pile up some dirt and some dust on top of Teotihuacan, which is down in Mexico, would it not look something similar to what we see on the left?
It's identical.
Now, this particular image was discovered by a gentleman in South Africa. His name is John Ward. He's an independent Mars researcher. And I'll show you just a quick sampling of his work next, but this is the most notable of his discoveries. Again, one of these guys just spending his spare time sifting through thousands of images looking for stuff. And here he comes and he finds, look at that. Does that look like a volcano to you, to anybody? Look, again, we have what appeared to be sides. Who wants to take a guess how big this thing is?
Oh my God, don't tell me.
I don't know, but it looks just like the image you just showed me because it's got the same four sides and the same placement.
Mm-hmm.
This thing is 2.5 miles big.
Oh my God. They were master builders, whoever they were.
See this structure, these steps here on the front? You cover those with some dirt, don't you think you'd get just a lump just here on the side? So who can tell? Like, look, you guys. I mean, it's just like you guys aren't pushing for pyramids on Mars, but just to the naked eye here, this looks like there could be something here. Because to the untrained eye, there's geometry, there's symmetry to this thing. It's got 4 equal sides. My only question, I'm not saying this is proof of pyramids and extraterrestrial civilization ancient on Mars. I am saying that we need to go and just take a closer look, not just with geologists, but with archaeologists, paleontologists, biologists. There's a whole team of different scientists from different disciplines that need to go and study this planet because arguably there's something more than what we've been told. Now, let me just, I just want to highlight, my job is to really highlight the work of these people doing this research. And John Ward has found, he's got a whole channel with stuff he's found. I'm just going to show you a simple collage of what else he's found. This thing here.
Is that a cell phone? That is a Nokia.
Let me give you some. Let me give you some scale here. I'll give you some scale. This thing up here is about, let's say, 50 meters wide. Okay, kind of funky. I have a video interview with John Ward where he talks about each one of these things, and we find Earth analogs. And there's something like this down in Mexico or Peru, I think. I forget where, but there's something that just looks like that. But look at it. It's got, arguably, it has symmetry to it. It's got equal sides, rounded, yes, but eroded, sure. It's just like, well, that's an odd thing. In the middle of the rest of the landscape, there's nothing else like it. Shouldn't we take a closer look? This thing over here is about 20 or 30 meters long. It's in a landscape that has a lot of different craters, but this is really odd. What it looks almost sinuous. What natural geological formation does this? It's a hole with
really weird.
Yeah, it does. It does look weird.
Something. It does look really weird. Now this thing down here is about the size of a boat.
Nokia. Oh, it ain't a Nokia. Never mind.
It's about the size of a boat.
Is there like something on the side of it?
It looks like it, right? Like a button, like a. It's hard to tell because you can't tell like how big these things are, but like you know what I mean.
So, don't we need to go take a closer look at these things? For anyone to say that there's nothing to see here, I think they're just being dishonest. Don't our natural curiosities suggest to us that there's something odd about these things that we are seeing? I'll show you. Okay, now one more collage by a different guy who's in Colorado. My buddy Gary. Gary is another one of these independent Mars researchers who has found dozens of what I'm about to show to you. Again, these are orbiter photographs, photographing structures that are huge. And the ones you're about to see are about 3/4 of a mile to a mile big. Okay, and Gary has found lots and lots of these things.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one on all the way to the right. Is weird. Looks like
All seeing eye or a seal of Tanit, all the way down to the bottom. And, yeah,
I just call them the triangles. He's got 2 dozens of these things. What we're seeing here looks like a tetrahedral shape to me. And this line here, what natural geological process makes a line like that that's 3/4 of a mile long? And then we sort of see the same thing here, a triangle with a mound, a pyramidal mound in the center, a triangle with a line, some sort of a triangle with a line, triangle with a line, triangle. And here we have a triangle in the middle of an impact crater. What are the chances an impact crater is going to make a triangle right in the center of it? And what triangles have these really, they're literally underlined with bolded. I don't know what natural process would make such a thing, and I can't find any geologist to give me a straight answer.
I just thought about something. I heard one time that Cairo in Arabic means Mars. And
Really?
yes, and that some people have suggested maybe that our Cairo here on Earth was named after the structures up there. And that maybe the ancients and the Sumerians, who had the map of the solar system and all that, maybe they knew about all this. And this is just, once again, another example of lost knowledge that we're playing catch up with.
The Mayans, when they disappeared, they showed their asses up on Mars and started building stuff. It looks just like that stuff. All of our ancient structures look like this before they're excavated.
So guys, I want to go back to this image because some of you mentioned the remote viewing Stargate program, which is what I was referring to, getting into the paranormal aspect of all of this. I, like many people, was skeptical of this idea of remote viewing because what are we really talking about here? Psychic powers. Okay. Maybe some of this is not new to you guys, but it was certainly new to me. But what I was most comfortable with in presenting the remote viewing side of this story, because you had some of these Stargate. Stargate was a program, a psychic spying program developed in the 70s, run by the U.S. Army. So the U.S. Army had a psychic spying program for 20 years. Okay, I know that sounds nuts, but that's what they had. That's a fact. Now, I'm not going to tell you that.
Nuts to me.
But to a lot of people, psychic abilities sounds crazy. It's like X-Men, right? So, but that's not what I'm focused on. What I'm focused on is the fact that the U.S. Army had a psychic spying program. And while they didn't really do too much with Mars, they did a few things with Mars. And for those of you who know Joe McMoneagle, who was one of the first or the first remote viewers of that program, who was tasked against Mars. Headless Giant, weren't you talking about this before?
Yes, sir. So Joe McMoneagle, he was only given the title of remote viewer number one. That was sort of like his handle or his call sign. So he was deeply involved with special forces and had this propensity of not dying when he should have died. And he even had a near-death encounter, which left him completely changed. And then he started experiencing sort of like psychic abilities and psychic gifts. And so he was trained by some other remote viewers and he became one of their agents. And so he never wanted to do any remote viewing that would jeopardize his ability to verify it. So they tricked him into doing this remote viewing on Mars because the CIA wanted to see what was actually happening 1 million BC on this planet during the same time that all of these findings are coming out. So I think they were interested in what exactly the nature of this life that you're talking about that they found way back in the 70s was doing on Mars 1 million years ago.
So there's this famous declassified CIA transcript of Joe McMoneagle's session where he remote viewed Mars. And this is what he was looking at. Now, he didn't know that at the time. He remote viewed Mars and he was relaying to his monitor. Here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a destroyed landscape, but I'm seeing these giant things that look like pyramids. And I'm paraphrasing here. Joe McMoneagle did not buy this. He didn't believe this himself. He's like, this sounds nuts. I can't believe that I've remote viewed pyramids on Mars. That's crazy. So what did he do? He went to NASA back then, and he asked NASA at the time for the negatives, because we didn't have digital back then. He asked for the negatives of specific coordinates. And he was able to verify for himself that what he was viewing was real because we had taken photographs of it. And this is the one that he was looking at. I was not able to interview him for the film, but I did interview somebody else from that same program, a gentleman by the name of Tom McNear, who was part of Ingo Swann's remote viewing team. Ingo Swann is another one of these famous remote viewers. He's no longer with us. But Tom McNear was on that. He was recruited into the program. And Ingo Swann's team was also tasked against Crater Pyramid. This is what this features is known as, Crater Pyramid. So the remote viewing team of the U.S. Army was looking at Mars, and they were looking at this particular feature. Now, why were they interested in something like this? Why would the U.S. Army be interested in Mars? Well, it's because NASA started taking lots of interesting looking photographs starting in 1976 that caused a lot of eyebrows to furl up because they're like, this. You know, when I first read Graham Hancock's Mars book and he starts talking about pyramids on Mars, boy, I tell you, I got such an unsettled feeling in the pit of my stomach.
Yeah, something kind of rings true when you read that book. You're like, oh, yeah, there's something here. I want to ask you, is Joe McMoneagle, is he the one who like reported going inside and seeing the giant entities that look like humans but bigger?
Yes, Joe McMoneagle.
Okay.
Joe
I just want to
McMoneagle
make.
did.
Okay,
And
perfect.
okay, now what's interesting is that within about a 2-week period, Ingo Swann's team was tasked against this same feature without knowing that Joe had just done it. And they observed the same things. And so I got Tom McNear, who was part of the U.S. Army, this program, to essentially recount this story for me, telling me about what Joe experienced. I wasn't able to get Joe. And then what Tom experienced. So to have a team of 5 people all cite the same thing that Joe did without having known they even worked on it together, talking about these giant megalithic pyramid structures, entities who are larger, cavernous halls inside these things. You know, gosh, I don't know where you go with that. I don't know how to process something like that. Now, Nick, there is more to this story, but I think we're going to leave it there because
Cliffhanger.
Can I say something?
it gets yes.
The one, so this is just quick thought. Not to say that's what this is, but the triangle that you showed with the line. Shoot, sorry. My cat is like back here doing God knows what. That it almost looked like the unincorporated line to give the symbol of air. So you have a triangle with the it, and it's the symbol for air. When you look at, if it is a pyramid next to a circle, it reminds me of the concept of squaring the circle, which is the technical way to say achieving the philosopher's stone, achieving the impossible, that you place a triangle inside of a circle in order to square it. And it's kind of, you know, you see emblems of this all over with in wars or in different emblems of old occultists or philosophers and what have you. So if you were standing on the ground at a certain angle, you would see the equilateral pyramid inside of the circle. So it almost gave me that feeling. So I don't know if that means.
Well, you know, I was unfamiliar with this symbol of air. I'm looking at it right now. That's interesting. I'll have to take a closer look into that.
And it's one of the 4 elements that's used to achieve the Philosopher's Stone.
Let me just conclude this by saying we still have this unanswered question about what happened to this blue planet. The question that I pose is, what turns a blue planet red? Thus the title of the film, Blue Planet Red. Now, for those of you who are interested, the film is coming out on Amazon in August. It's just a short way away. I have a whole website that basically documents all this stuff and has all the published research linked, so you can go take a look at it for yourself. I continue to work on YouTube. But this question of what happened to the planet, we do present the research that does provide an answer to this question. In fact, there are a few different pieces of research that provide an answer to this question. What NASA will tell you is that the solar wind has stripped away the atmosphere of Mars due to the weakened magnetic field of the planet. The problem is the solar wind alone is not enough to explain the nearly complete loss of the atmosphere. It's simply not stripping it away fast enough to account for the nearly complete loss of the atmosphere. There are other explanations for what happened to the atmosphere, all based on research by people much smarter than I, who have unfortunately been marginalized due to the claims that are being made. But these claims aren't just, I think. It's based on the data collected by who? Who collects the data? NASA collects the data. It's NASA's data. They do a great job collecting data. They don't do a great job talking about what they've discovered. And what they've discovered, as published by other scientists in the film who we did not talk about tonight, who have written about this in books, when I first read about this, it kept me up for 3 nights. Because one of the explanations, while being terrifying in its own right, is a natural explanation. The other is not.
You're talking about Mars, right? Still
talking about
Yeah.
Mars.
So
What
one
happened
could
to Mars?
so maybe there was a natural cataclysm, or maybe there was a cosmic battle that messed up the whole side of Mars. They say it's like peppered with rocks on one side, as if something next to it blew up. And if you look into Sumerian myths, you look into Tiamat, there seems to have been a cosmic war where a planet was exploded or blown up.
So for any people who have heard any stories like what Tim is talking about, well, guess what? There's data to back it up.
I have right here, it says the radioactive isotopes on Mars from nuclear war. The presence of atmospheric radioactive isotopes on Mars, such as 12(9XE) and 80Kr, has been noted in scientific studies suggested the possible past nuclear events in the atmosphere of Mars.
So for those of you who think that sounds interesting, well, this movie's for you.
Definitely for me,
detail.
then.
We go into detail about this, and I do my best to try to present this, and to not just present this material, but present the people who have spent their entire careers studying this stuff and publishing it on it multiple times in peer-reviewed journals, thinking that it's going to make a difference. But unfortunately, statistics and data, they don't really make a difference. What does make a difference is stories. And that's where I feel like I have something to add to this whole thing. So guys, I really do appreciate you listening to me for damn near 2 hours. Geez, over 2 hours.
Oh,
Goodness gracious.
Awesome.
I know this is sort of outside of what you guys normally talk about. So I really appreciate you giving me the time to go through it. And there's, if any of this appeals to you, there's more. And those of us who are working on Mars, we do it because we feel like there is a story that the rest of humanity simply needs to be made aware of. And I think there is a connection between what happened on Mars and what we are observing with the UFO activity here on Earth. We can get into that later, but I think it has a role to play in the overall disclosure topic. And it's just simply about getting the attention that this research really deserves. And, it's thanks to you guys who have a curiosity about this stuff and willing to listen to guys like me who have sort of put the pieces together. But my work is based off of those who have been spending a lot more time on it, and they need all the recognition that they can get. So thank you guys.
Oh, thank you, man. That was great.
Great.
About the 2 hours. Perfect guest, man. We didn't, definitely some weird shit. Again, like I had said, I didn't see the last about 25 or 30 minutes. And, people probably even know my whole idea as being an occultist. I sometimes don't even know what the question that's out in the skies. I've said I think it's the reflection of the back of my eyeball at times. So, like, I don't know what to consider that stuff, but the shit that you showed in this movie is just fucking weird. It's even the fact, I know nobody, obviously I don't trust NASA either. I think this is just, for me as a conspiracy theorist, this is just another piece of evidence showing you that they're contradicting themselves. If, whatever, why is that? Very weird. And I really appreciate you coming on, Brian. I know, like you said, it wasn't particularly something that we'd cover, but it kind of does fit in a way. And I thought it was actually really well done. And thank you, man. It was a pleasure having you on, and you really, you had a lot to say and you covered a lot. And believe it or not, there's a lot in the movie that he didn't cover. So definitely, if you're into this, man, go check it out. I watched it. I thought it was good. Does anybody else want to add anything before we wrap this up?
I love the presentation. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love the presentation. I feel like I learned a lot. Like I said before, Brian has this great Jeff Goldblum soothing, relaxing, articulate thing going on. So, I absolutely enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And I'm looking forward to watching the movie too.
Thank you.
The other thing I was going to say was that it's probably beyond the scope of the movie, and then obviously it would be another discussion. But is there any legitimacy to the claim that there is an obelisk on Phobos?
Yes. John Ward, that South African independent Mars researcher, has done a very detailed analysis of that, and you can find some more information. I did interview him for my YouTube channel. We talk about that specifically.
Nice.
And a lot of what these independent Mars researchers do is, again, they sort of enhance the image to bring out some of the detail and make these things a little bit more clear for us to see. And he's done some great work on that thing specifically. That quite interesting, if you ask me.
Awesome. All right. Well, I guess if nobody else has got anything else to say, we could wrap it up. I did add your links in there during the show, so if people want to go check out his YouTube interviews and all the extra stuff that he says that's on there, his links in the bottom. Go check it out. Thank you all of you for coming on. Yeah, I'm not gonna have all of you plug your show now. It's been long enough, but yeah, I appreciate all of you. Brian, you want to let anybody know? You want to promote the movie again, or your website, or anything else before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, just one-stop shop. You can find everything you need to know about the film, about my contact information at blueplanetred.net. Okay, I'm also on Twitter at Brian Cory Dobbs, just my name, and on YouTube at Brian Cory Dobbs.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Yeah, man. Again, that was a great presentation. Very professionally done. Awesome stuff. And thank you everybody in the chat too that hung out. That's what's up. It was a long one, and there was a lot of people there from the beginning. And I appreciate that. At one point, I was just so focused, I really wasn't looking at the chat. Headless was kind of dealing with it. But thank you very much for everybody checking it out. That's where we go live. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.